Hi, boys and girls. Today we are going to look at numbers called multiples. Can you label your notebook page multiples? And I color-coded the slide, so anything written in blue, you're going to write down in your notebook. If it's written in a different color like black, you don't have to write it down, we're just going to talk about it. Okay, so first let's put the definition of what a multiple is. Multiple is a pattern of repeated addition. And we know that repeated addition is the same thing as multiplication. And if you look at the word multiples, you know that it looks like multiply and multiplication. So these are all related. And our multiples are going to be like our products or our answers in a multiplication fact. So write down this definition of a multiple. And I want you to think about this as skip counting. So let's talk about the multiples of 2, because I think you've always known the multiples of 2 since a very young age. So we're going to start off, you're going to write down multiples of 2 in your notebook. You can pause the video and do that. The first multiple of 2 is 2. The first multiple of any number is going to be that number. I'll write that down in blue. Our next multiple of 2 is 4. And I'll show you why. 2 times 1 is 2. That's our first one. 2 times 2 is 4. That's our second. 2 times 3 is 6. That is going to be our third multiple. And it's going to keep going in that pattern. Remember, this is a pattern. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Can you fill in, pause the video and fill in your notebook, what are the next 3 multiples of 2? Okay, so hopefully you realize that this would be 2 times 6, this would be 2 times 7, and this would be 2 times 8. So I'm going to fill in those numbers, 12, 14, and 16. Just so you know, multiples go on forever. Let's put that in our notebook. Let's put a star underneath this and say multiples go on forever. You can write yours on the line correctly. I ran out of space. I can never ask you to name all the multiples. You'll be here forever. So keep in mind that will never be a question that a teacher asks you to name them all, because it's not possible. Okay, so let's talk about the multiples of 6. Okay, we're going to think about starting at 6 times 1. And that gives me 6, and I know my first multiple is always going to be that number, always, because it's that number times 1. Then I'm going to say 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times 4 is 24. Can you give me the next 3 multiples of 6? Write those down in your notebook, pause the video, and tell me the next 3 multiples of 6. All right, hopefully you realize this is 6 times 4, so we need 6 times 5, which is 30, 6 times 6, which is 36, and 6 times 7, which is 42. So those are the first 7 multiples of 6. Okay, let's do a little bit of a harder number. List the first 3 multiples of 12 and 16. Now we know, or we're learning, our multiples of 12 because we're practicing our facts, but we need to talk about how we're going to get the multiples of 16. So write these 2 things in your notebook, multiples of 12, multiples of 16. If you want to pause the video and try it on your own, you can do that. Otherwise, you can do it with me. So the 12 multiples, I think that's pretty easy because I'm going to think to myself, what's 12 times 1? Of course it's 12. And then 12 times 2, well, I know that, but if I didn't, I could really quickly add 12 and 12, and I'm going to get 24. And then my third multiple, why don't you pause the video and figure that out if you haven't done that yet. Your third multiple is 36. Now, how about the first three for 16? Well, we know it's 16. 100% that is the first multiple. But let's say you didn't know the second number. Well, we can add 16 plus 16 because that's the same thing as finding our multiples is skip counting or repeated addition. So I know that if I add these two numbers, I'm going to get 32. And I'm going to use addition again to get the third one. So why don't you pause the video, and if you need to write it down in your notebook, your addition sentence, do that. I'm going to add another 16, and I get 48. So these are my first three multiples of 16. I can always go back to addition if I don't know them. All right. Can you write down, pause the video, and tell me the first 5 multiples of the number 8, please? Okay, so let's talk about, if I just skip count by 8, 8 times 1, 8 times 2, 8 times 3, 8 times 4, 8 times 5. Those are your first 5 multiples of 8. What are the first 5 multiples of 9? Pause the video, write those down in your notebook. Okay, and we have 9 times 1, 9 times 2, 9 times 3, 9 times 4, 9 times 5. Those are our first 5 multiples of the number 9. Let's try one different type of problem. So you don't have to write the questions in your notebook, but I do want you to label it 1, 2, 3, and 4. And let's write the answers to these. Is 49 a multiple of 7? So if you think to yourself, one of two things. You can either list all the multiples of 7, or you can say to yourself, 7 times something. Does that equal 49? And that may be where you need to skip count by 7s if you're not sure. So I want you to write down yes or no for number 1. You can pause the video and think about that, or do some work to figure it out. Number 2, is 18 a multiple of 3? So if I skip counted by 3s, would I get to 18? So you can pause the video, do some work, and write a yes or no for that one. Is 3 a multiple of 9? Okay, so now I need to count by 9s. I need to think of my 9 facts. If I count by 9s, am I going to say 3? So I want you to do some work for that one and write yes or no. And then for number 4, in your notebook, I want you to write down all the multiples of 2 that are in this list, from 5 all the way to 15. You can pause the video and work on that, and then I'm going to show all the answers. Okay, for number 1, is 49 a multiple of 7? The answer is yes, it is. If you got that right, put a little check mark by it. Is 18 a multiple of 3? It is a multiple of 3. Because if I keep counting, I know that 3 times 6 is 18. So you put yes, put a little check mark by that. Is 3 a multiple of 9? Well, the answer is no. Because if I counted by 9s, I'm never going to say 3. And here's what's tricky, is if I counted by 3s, I would say 9. So that means 9 is a multiple of 3, but 3 is not a multiple of 9. So if you got that right, put a little check mark. And let's take a look at the numbers down here. You should have circled 24, 18, or written down 6, and 8. And I know that because they're all even. So any even number, even if I gave you a number like this, 2,464, and I said, is that a multiple of 2? You would say yes, because it's an even number. And so that's really easy to figure out. Same thing with multiples of 5. Let's do one last thing. Any number that ends in a 5 or a 0 is a multiple of 5. You don't even have to do any math to figure it out. If I had 1,246 and I said, is that a multiple of 5? The answer is no, because it ends in a 6. Okay, great job. You are ready to do some practice.